Every hallway whispers. Every door creaks like it remembers. For over 2 centuries, the White House has been a stage for power, war, and death. And some say not everyone left. Presidents, first ladies, soldiers, children, they walk the floors. They rearrange the furniture. They knock when no one's there. This isn't just America's most powerful building. It might be its most haunted. 50 legends. One house that won't forget. Welcome to the other side of history. This is 50 Legends That Still Haunt the White House. Abraham Lincoln's ghost. It always starts with him. The tall, gaunt shadow standing at the end of the hallway. The stovepipe hat brushing against the ceiling. The eyes, not filled with terror, but with the kind of weary grief that could drag empires to their knees. You see Abraham Lincoln's ghost once, they say, and you don't forget it. Because he doesn't just haunt the White House, he haunts history itself. There are few American spirits more omnipresent or more mourned. Lincoln died not just as a man, but as a national wound carved deep into the marble bones of the Capitol. And the White House, his wartime bunker, his sleepless nest of impossible decisions, never let go of him. Even in death, he kept coming back. Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands reportedly answered a knock on her White House bedroom door one night, only to find Lincoln's transparent form standing on the other side. She fainted on the spot. Winston Churchill, grizzled, half-drunk, wrapped in nothing but a towel, claimed he emerged from a steamy bath in the Lincoln bedroom to find the 16th president silently staring at him by the fireplace. "Good evening, Mr. President," Churchill allegedly said, cool as Scotch. "You seem to have me at a disadvantage." After that, he never stayed in that room again. It doesn't matter whether you're a monarch, a prime minister, or just a staffer making their midnight rounds. If you're in the White House, Lincoln might come knocking. His ghost is no simple parlor trick or Halloween tale. This is a man who carried a nation's death toll in his breast pocket, who walked alone through candle-lit hallways while the country burned. The Lincoln that lingers is not a cheap thrill. He's an echo of absolute consequence. And when he appears, people report more than just sightings. They report weight, cold, thick air, silence that crushes, the feeling that something enormous is looking straight through them. Why he haunts is the real question. Is it unfinished business? Mourning for the nation he tried to stitch together with bloody hands? Or is he simply stuck in the halls where he once shouldered the unbearable? Maybe the White House is his tomb, maybe it's his penance, and maybe he's not the only one who refused to leave. Because just down the hallway, behind the heavy doors of the Rose Room, a voice echoes like thunder. And it's not friendly. Andrew Jackson's ghost. He doesn't knock. He kicks down the damn door. Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory himself, has the most aggressive afterlife residency in presidential history. If Abraham Lincoln's ghost is a mournful whisper in the night, Jackson's is a cussing hurricane slamming through the drywall. The Rose Room is said to be his domain, and those who've stayed there speak of an energy that feels like stepping into a bear trap, sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. Jackson was a man known for duels, death threats, and dictating policy by sheer volume. That temper didn't die with him. It just changed zip codes. White House staff and guests have long reported hearing thunderous, disembodied laughter coming from the Rose Room, followed by slamming doors, guttural muttering, and the unmistakable sound of someone very dead throwing a tantrum. One visitor even claimed to hear swearing in 19th century Southern drawl echoing from the walls. Poltergeist? No. Just a former president continuing to be the loudest guy in the building. Even First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln, who famously held seances in the White House, reported Jackson's ghost as one of the most aggressive presences she encountered. He was furious then, and it seems eternity hasn't mellowed him out. Some believe Jackson is eternally enraged by how the country evolved after him. Others think he's just too stubborn to move on. In the list of historical haunts, Jackson is unique. He doesn't merely appear, he performs. His spirit isn't a flicker in the mirror. It's a full-body tackle, a nightmare in boots. And in a building where ghosts are expected to be moaning relics of sorrow, Jackson brings the chaos like a bar fight that never ends. If you hear something crash in the Rose Room, don't go investigate. And for God's sake, don't talk back. He might answer. But not all White House spirits arrive with anger. Some come carrying linens. Abigail Adams' ghost. She comes with the laundry. Abigail Adams, America's second First Lady, is said to be one of the most quietly persistent presences in the White House. When John Adams moved into the then unfinished executive mansion in 1800, it was little more than a cold stone shell. No proper water system, no finished walls, and definitely no dryer. So Abigail made do. She hung the laundry in the East Room, where the air was best and the light was strong. 2 centuries later, she's still at it. Abigail's ghost is often seen floating along the same path she once walked, arms outstretched as if bearing invisible linens. Witnesses describe a woman in a cap and shawl, head down, gliding with purpose toward the East Room. No drama, no blood-curdling shrieks, just spectral domesticity on loop. And accompanying her, the faint smell of soap and damp linen. The White House may be a political furnace, but when she passes through, it smells like Monday laundry. Unlike Jackson, Abigail's no poltergeist. She doesn't break things. She doesn't scream. But her ghost is powerful in its routine. There's something deeply eerie about a spirit with chores. It's one thing to be trapped by tragedy, but to be bound by habit? That's another level of haunting. It suggests a life that never really let go. Some staff have reported feeling a sudden chill when walking into the East Room, followed by the distinct sensation that someone just brushed past them, invisible and busy. Others have claimed that they saw wet footprints forming out of nowhere. The ghost of Abigail Adams is not there to scare. She's there to finish the laundry. And she's not the only First Lady with unfinished business, because out in the Rose Garden someone is still standing guard. Dolly Madison's ghost. She built it. She protects it. Dolly Madison, the social queen of early Washington, was known for her wit, her charm, and her absolute refusal to be ignored. She turned the White House into a center of political culture. She saved priceless artifacts from British flames. And when she died, she simply kept showing up. The legend says Dolly still watches over the Rose Garden, the same garden she helped plant, cultivate, and defend during the Madison administration. Long after her death, when First Lady Edith Wilson ordered the garden torn up for redesign, gardeners reported a strange, sudden interruption. A dark figure appeared beside them, frozen in time. They ran. The work was halted, and Mrs. Madison's garden stayed right where it was. Her ghost has been seen more than once in the garden's shadowy corners, often smiling. She's not a wrathful specter. She's more like an HOA president from beyond, making sure the tulips are in order. But make no mistake, she takes her job seriously. There's a quiet power to her haunting. It's not thunder and flickering lights, it's presence. A feeling that someone's watching you work. That the history under your feet is still breathing. That this isn't just landscaping. It's legacy. And speaking of legacy, there's another presence in the White House who practically invented it. He's quieter than Jackson, less domestic than Abigail, and more philosophical than Dolly. But he's there. You might even hear him. Humming. Thomas Jefferson's ghost. If Lincoln is grief and Jackson is rage, then Thomas Jefferson's ghost is something stranger. Curiosity on eternal loop. A phantom thinker. A wandering idea with legs. His presence isn't tied to drama or disaster, but to design, contemplation, and maybe regret. Witnesses don't report screams or slamming doors. Instead, they mention a soft presence, an unseen energy around the Jefferson Memorial Room or the library, like someone is quietly pacing, hands behind his back, eyes scanning invisible volumes. Some have even claimed to hear humming, classical violin pieces soft and slow, drifting down hallways with no source in sight. Jefferson played the violin in life. It soothed him. Maybe it still does. But unlike many other White House spirits, Jefferson rarely makes a direct appearance. He's not bold. He's ambient. He shows up as drafts of cold air in corners without windows, as the smell of old parchment and candle wax, as the echo of footsteps in rooms that should be silent. Why is he here? Maybe it's the architecture. He loved structure, design, balance. Maybe he's checking in on the building that embodied the Enlightenment ideals he championed, only to see them weathered and distorted by centuries of compromise. Maybe he's trying to fix something even now. Or maybe ghosts like Jefferson never really leave because they were too embedded in the bones of the place. Not just its walls, but its identity. Which brings us to a different kind of presence. One that doesn't glide or pace or hum. One that storms through history like it owns the place. Theodore Roosevelt's ghost. Boom. That's the energy TR brings, dead or alive. He didn't just occupy the White House. He saturated it. With sweat, with sound, with the sheer overwhelming volume of his personality. And if you believe the tales, he's still at it. Theodore Roosevelt doesn't appear in flowing robes or hover above the floor. His spirit, they say, manifests as kinetic chaos, furniture mysteriously shifting an inch, thudding sounds echoing from empty rooms, the sense that someone just sprinted past you in full military garb. White House staff have spoken about sudden rushes of air on windless days, of laughter that arrives and departs like a cavalry charge, of windows swinging open on their own during moments of national tension. Not evil, not even spooky, just present. A larger-than-life essence that refuses to be erased. TR was a force of nature in life, hunting, boxing, reforming, trust-busting, and death didn't dull the edges. If anything, it made him more concentrated. A hyperactive residue baked into the walls like cigar smoke and ambition. Some say he appears during times of crisis, stomping unseen through the hallways as if assessing the mettle of his successors. Others believe he's simply too big to go anywhere else. The White House doesn't just remember Roosevelt, it echoes him. And just when you think the energy can't get any stronger, you hear footsteps in the attic. William Henry Harrison's ghost? Blink, and you'll miss him. So did history. William Henry Harrison served as president for only 31 days, then died of pneumonia, likely exacerbated by a 2-hour inauguration speech in freezing rain. Shortest presidency ever, a brief spark, a footnote. But his ghost, they say, lingers. Not in the grand halls or gardens, but in the attic, an overlooked space for an overlooked man. Staff report unexplained sounds from the top of the mansion. Pacing, knocking, and sometimes, worst of all, wheezing. A deep, rattling breath that seems to fill the ceiling above your bed like a second heartbeat. It's a cruel twist. A man whose term was cut short, now endlessly wandering the place he barely got to call home. They say he walks in circles up there, muttering unfinished speeches. That sometimes papers blow around a room with no source of wind. That doors lock and unlock themselves in rhythm, like tapping fingers on a podium. There's no grandeur to Harrison's haunting. No showmanship. Just repetition. The infinite loop of a man who waited decades for his moment, only to die with it still in his hands. And if you think a single month in office isn't enough to anchor a soul, wait until you hear about the next ghost. He never truly left offices at all. John Tyler's ghost. Some ghosts scream, some linger. John Tyler simply declines to leave. The 10th President of the United States, Tyler was always a bit of an outsider, an accidental president, who rose to power after William Henry Harrison's death, and who later aligned with the Confederacy during the Civil War. That legacy, murky and uncomfortable, makes him something of a spectral mystery. Unlike his louder, flashier fellow haunts, Tyler's ghost is rarely seen, but it is felt. Staff describe cold spots that seem to drift with intelligence, light footsteps where no one should be walking, the uncanny sensation that someone is quietly watching from the edge of your vision. No threat, no malice, just presence. One that seems weighted with second thoughts. Most reports link Tyler's ghost to the second floor of the residence, especially near what was once his bedroom. Sometimes visitors hear hushed murmurs, as if he's still debating policy in private, long after his constituents have turned to dust. Other times, people report doors quietly creaking open, only to find the room empty and still. His is a ghost of ambiguity, a figure who once led the nation, then pledged allegiance to a seceding faction. Not quite villain, not quite hero, forever out of sync with the national narrative. Maybe that's why he lingers. Because while his name appears in history books, it never quite took root in public memory. And what haunts more than being forgotten? But down the hall, another First Lady is making her own silent stand. And her ghost doesn't fade in and out. It flickers. First Lady Caroline Harrison's ghost. She left more than porcelain patterns and polite dinner menus. Caroline Harrison, wife of President Benjamin Harrison, was a dignified woman with an eye for art and an iron spine under all that lace. She brought a painter's sensibility to the White House, and death, apparently, didn't change that. Today, her ghost is said to linger in the Treaty Room, once her second-floor Oval Office and the surrounding quarters. But she's not just drifting through. She's intervening. Flickering lights? She's been blamed. Levitation? Yes. Objects reportedly rising inches off desks, then settling gently back into place. There's a kind of gentility to it all. She doesn't haunt like a banshee. She haunts like a woman who won't tolerate clutter. White House staff over the decades have quietly shared stories, doors opening just before someone reaches them, footsteps softly pacing in empty rooms, and most famously, lights that go haywire, on, off, and on again, as if someone disapproves of the ambiance. Always tasteful, Caroline's ghost doesn't break things. She adjusts them, corrects them. It's said that when the home becomes too loud, too chaotic, too graceless, Caroline steps in. The energy changes, the mood settles. A ghost, not of vengeance, but of order. She didn't just leave her mark. She left her standards. And maybe that explains why the chaos down the hall disturbs her. Because the next ghost was born of fire and war, and he's still smoldering. The burned British soldier. He didn't want to be here. But he burned with the building, and now he won't leave. In 1814, British troops torched the White House during the War of 1812. Smoke-blackened walls, shattered windows, scorched timber. Among them, legend says, was one particular soldier who perished in the flames, and whose spirit was fused into the structure itself. He's not seen often, but he's felt. A sudden wave of heat in a cold corridor. The metallic sting of ash in your nose, the heavy tread of boots echoing where no one walks. The spirit of this unnamed British soldier doesn't whisper. He marches. Some say he still wears his uniform, charred and cracked. Others say he's nothing but smoke, vaguely human-shaped, drifting across fire-scarred thresholds. He is said to haunt areas that bore the worst of the blaze, especially those few original structures still standing beneath layers of renovations. When the lights flicker orange or the temperature jumps inexplicably in the middle of winter, some staff mutter his name under their breath, the burned one, a ghost with no political allegiance, just one mission, to never be forgotten. And yet, he's not the only creature prowling those darkened lower levels, because deeper in the halls, crouching just beyond the flickering light, is something that doesn't march. It prowls. The demon cat, DC. It starts small. A flicker of movement near your boot. A faint meow echoing through concrete tunnels. You look. Nothing. But you feel it watching. The demon cat, DC to those who know the legend, is the most infamous non-human specter haunting Washington. Part cryptid, part omen, part poltergeist. DC slinks its way into history just before everything hits the fan. When the cat appears, catastrophe follows. By day, DC is said to look like a normal house cat. Black, unbothered, probably judging you. But at night, especially in the White House basement or Capitol tunnels, it shifts. Witnesses describe it swelling to the size of a panther, with glowing eyes and razor-like claws. Sometimes it hisses. Sometimes it vanishes mid-pounce. Sometimes it just stares. It's been spotted before presidential assassinations, before economic collapses, before wars. Guards have reportedly fled their posts after seeing it loom larger than life in a shadowy hallway, only for it to vanish the moment they blinked. No one knows where it came from. Some say it was left behind by a Civil War soldier. Others believe it's an ancient guardian, or a demon posing as a pet. What's clear is that D.C. isn't just haunting the White House, it's warning it. And the worst part? When you hear its purr, you're already too late. The cold spot in the yellow oval room. There's nothing more unnerving than a chill that doesn't belong. The yellow oval room is elegance incarnate. Velvet chairs, antique clocks, and chandeliers dripping with presidential history. But amid the soft lighting and dignified stillness, there's a spot. Just one. A space in the room where the temperature plummets without reason. A ghost's fingerprint. A wound in the air. White House staff and guests have described it for decades. You walk in and everything's normal. Warmth, decorum, the usual political pomp. Then you step there, and suddenly it's January in the middle of July. The cold hits your bones first, then the silence. Thick, heavy silence, as if even sound is afraid to pass through. Some say it feels like walking through fog. Others describe it more like static, an invisible field charged with memory and something else, something waiting. There are no confirmed sightings in this cold spot, no flickering lights, no faces in mirrors, and that's what makes it worse. It's not about what you see, it's about what you feel, the kind of cold that implies you're not alone, that you're interrupting something old, something that doesn't appreciate being walked through. Presidents have avoided the space. Aides have rearranged furniture to subtly shift the layout around the cold patch, like trying to dodge a cursed tile on a chessboard. Whatever occupies that invisible square of haunted air, it hasn't moved. And if the air can whisper, then it's saying, keep walking. But if you stay long enough, you might start hearing something more than silence. Something like footsteps. Mysterious footsteps. Footsteps are supposed to follow you, not lead. Yet in the White House, the echoes come first. Then the dread. Unexplained footsteps have been heard on nearly every floor of the mansion. Boots on marble, soft-soled shoes on carpet. Always alone, always unclaimed. They start without cause and end without explanation. And they do something no human steps should do. They stop right behind you and never pass. Staff members have described the unmistakable sound of pacing above their heads, only to find no one on the floor above. Others report late-night hallway patrols disrupted by heavy footfalls coming from around the corner, only to find the corridor empty and the air somehow denser than before. Some attribute the steps to long-dead presidents retracing the routes of power. Others believe they're the guards who never stop their rounds. But most terrifying is this. The footsteps often mirror you. You walk, they walk, you stop. So do they. One butler swore he heard steps trailing him through the West Wing for 5 straight minutes. When he turned to confront the noise, it vanished, only for the sound to resume the moment he resumed walking, as if something was waiting for him to make the first move. Footsteps mean presence. Even if you can't see the body, you hear the soul. And if you're brave enough to speak, who's there? You might get an answer, but not in words. Unexplained voices and whispers. There's something worse than screaming in the dark. It's whispering. Unexplained voices have long been a staple of White House hauntings. Not booming declarations, not shouts, but low murmurs, breath against the ear, half sentences spoken as if you've just missed the punchline, and the warning. Security guards stationed on the night shift have admitted to hearing conversations in empty hallways, soft, indistinct, male and female, sometimes laughing, sometimes arguing, always impossible to locate, like the voices are bouncing off 200 years of political secrets. Others report whispers drifting through keyholes, right up close, as if the walls are trying to speak, or maybe listen. One staffer tells of standing alone in a pantry and hearing someone clearly say, "Don't forget the letter. No one was there." No letter was ever found. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something critical, that the ghost had given her a task, and she'd already failed. These whispers don't come often, but when they do, they stick, in the brain, in the bones, because they sound like memory, like regret that can't be silenced. And the longer you stay in this house of endless repetition, the more you wonder, are the ghosts talking to you, or are they talking to each other? Either way, don't flick the light switch, because the next thing you notice is that the lights are flickering on their own. Flickering lights and electrical malfunctions. It always starts with a flicker. Not a power outage, not a surge. A pulse, like something breathing through the wires. In a building wired and rewired more times than a Cold War spy ring, the White House's electrical quirks are often chalked up to age. But there's a difference between faulty wiring and a chandelier that dims in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. The reports stack up like circuit breakers. Lights turning off the moment someone enters a room, only to flare back on the second they leave. Entire banks of switches refusing to respond until a whispered apology is offered. Ceiling fixtures that sway, not from wind or vibration, but from something unseen brushing past. And then there are the escalations. Imagine working late in the West Wing. Fluorescent hum overhead. Then, pop. Darkness. Emergency lights kick in, but they're cold, uneven. You feel watched. You reach for your phone flashlight. It won't turn on. Not broken, just what? Resistant. Like whatever's in the room doesn't want to be seen. Presidents and staff alike have experienced these phenomena. One press secretary swore the lights only failed when he lied. Another aide said the East Room chandeliers blinked in Morse-like rhythm during a particularly heated debate about foreign policy. No explanation, no repeat. Could be a ghost, could be many. Or maybe, just maybe, the building is remembering. Electrical echoes of historical tension replayed like a vinyl stuck on a scratch. And when the lights finally stabilize, the room feels heavier. You exhale, thinking it's over. Then the desk drawer slides open on its own. Moving objects, nothing says you're not alone, like your coffee mug casually sliding across the table while you're watching. The White House has long been home to more than just political movements. There are physical ones, too. Furniture shifts, papers rearrange, pens roll against gravity. These aren't drafty window tricks or vibrations from traffic. These are objects moving with intention. Staff recount stories of chairs that refuse to stay tucked in, of portraits tilted just slightly to the left, no matter how many times they're straightened, of doors that open silently behind them and close with a click just after they leave. One intern swore her stapler disappeared for hours, only to be found perfectly centered on a hallway table 3 floors down. It's not violent, it's not malicious, but it's precise, like a message being sent in small, infuriating gestures. The Lincoln bedroom is notorious for this. Covers are tugged, pillows flipped. Visitors wake to find their belongings slightly rearranged, as if someone came in during the night to judge their packing skills. President Truman once wrote in a letter that he heard knocks on the door, and when he investigated, no one was there, except for the furniture, which had changed places. Is it mischief? Is it memory? Or is it just the house reacting, stretching its limbs, adjusting its posture, nudging its history back into place? Whatever the cause, the message is clear. You're not in charge here. And if you think objects moving is strange, wait until the air changes. The scent of lilacs. You don't see her at first. You smell her. Dolly Madison, the grand dame of Washington society, is long gone. But her presence persists in perfume. Specifically, lilacs. Sweet, floral, utterly out of place in a climate-controlled stone fortress. And yet, there it is. A sudden whiff. A breeze where no breeze should be. A scent tied not to nature, but to memory. It happens most often near the rose garden, her pride, her passion. Some say it's her way of checking in, of making sure the flowers still bloom the way she intended. And woe to the gardener who tries to change her layout. One attempt to redesign the space was reportedly met with full-blown apparitions and tools mysteriously disappearing. But the lilacs, that's the real calling card. Staff have opened sealed rooms only to be overwhelmed by floral fragrance. Visitors passing through empty corridors have paused, sniffed, and asked, "Who's wearing perfume?" The answer is always, no one. Some say the scent only appears when Dolly is pleased. Others claim it's a warning. Smell the flowers before something wilts. And in a place where even the walls remember, scent becomes more than smell. It becomes signal. So when you catch that faint trail of lilac in the air, don't just breathe it in. Pay attention. Because sometimes, when the flowers bloom, someone starts talking. And the voice doesn't belong to anyone living. The ghost of David Burns. He never wanted to sell. And even after death, he hasn't stopped reminding people. David Burns was a wealthy landowner in the late 18th century, a man who once possessed a massive portion of what would become Washington, D.C., including the ground where the White House now stands. George Washington himself negotiated with Burns to acquire the land for the federal city. Burns eventually relented, but if the legends are true, he did so reluctantly, and his discontent didn't end with the paperwork. The ghost of David Burns is not one of tragic romance or violent demise. It's a bureaucratic grudge, a centuries-long land dispute with the federal government, except now the government owns the house, and Burns haunts it. He's been heard, not seen. A voice, clear and assertive, sometimes proclaiming, "I'm Mr. Burns," echoing down empty hallways. Once during a tour, a White House worker reportedly heard that phrase whispered right behind her ear. No one was there. The voice wasn't angry, exactly, just insistent, like a man forever trying to reclaim what was taken from him. Security personnel have also recounted moments when their radios picked up static-laced interruptions, brief, garbled phrases that included a single intelligible name. Burns. No explanation. No one on the other end. Just his name, crackling through the wires like a message from a courtroom beyond the grave. He doesn't knock things over, doesn't flicker lights, but he lingers. And in a building constructed on a reluctant foundation, maybe that's enough to keep his spirit rooted in place. But Burns wasn't the only architect with unresolved feelings. Because not far from where his name echoes, another ghost walks with a blueprint in hand. The ghost of Pierre L'Enfant. Pierre Charles L'Enfant designed Washington, D.C., on paper at least. But his legacy? That's complicated. Commissioned by George Washington himself, L'Enfant envisioned a capital city of grandeur, symmetry, and symbolism. A Parisian-inspired metropolis of power. But he was temperamental, notoriously difficult, and eventually fired before his vision was fully realized. Much of his work was altered, revised, or simply ignored. And maybe that's why he's still here. The ghost of L'Enfant is reportedly seen wandering the grounds near the White House, sometimes inside the building itself. He's often described as pacing, muttering in French, gesturing as if mid-argument or mid-construction. One account describes a man in 18th century attire examining blueprints that aren't there, then vanishing into a wall. He doesn't interact, he evaluates. Some believe he appears during renovations or when major changes are being planned, as if silently judging the updates against the master plan he never got to finish. Staff have reported tools being mysteriously moved or schematics being altered overnight. Nothing dramatic, just small exact corrections. There's an energy to his ghost that feels unsettled, not angry, but unfulfilled. He came to America to build a monument to democracy, only to be buried in obscurity and overshadowed by compromise. And in that sense, he is the very blueprint of a haunted man, one whose legacy was paved over by the city he dreamed up. If you feel watched while rearranging office furniture in the West Wing, don't worry. It's just the ghost of a man who wanted every angle perfect. But while L'Enfant built from ambition, the next ghost was forged in flame and fury. The British officer's ghost in the treaty room. He came, he burned, and according to legend, he never quite left. During the War of 1812, British troops stormed Washington and torched the White House. Most retreated, some perished, and one officer, so the stories go, stayed behind in more ways than one. Today, his ghost is said to haunt the treaty room. An ironic twist, given that it's now a space associated with diplomacy and calm. This officer's presence isn't polite. He's been described as a cold draft sweeping through the room even when windows are sealed. Documents left out on desks have been found rearranged or scorched slightly at the edges. Staff have sworn they saw a reflection in the glass. A man in a British uniform, face partially obscured by smoke, standing just behind them. His haunting is a smoldering one. Objects warmed by invisible fire. Footsteps heard walking through non-existent ash. Once, during a late-night walkthrough, a guard entered the room and immediately choked on smoke that wasn't there. The air cleared the moment he stepped back out. The ghost never speaks. He doesn't scream, but his resentment, like his uniform, still burns. It's the lingering spirit of a man who came to destroy and perhaps failed to notice when the war ended. And in the White House, a place so full of symbolism, he's become his own ironic emblem, a soldier of empire, now stuck in a room of treaties. But the silence he leaves behind never lasts, because the next sound you might hear is a baby crying, from nowhere and everywhere. The crying baby. There are few sounds more universally unsettling than a baby crying in the dark. In the White House, that sound is even worse, because it comes from nowhere. No child lives in that wing. No crib has occupied that room for decades. And yet, the sound echoes, soft at first, then piercing. Helpless, agonizing, real. Staff who work the night shifts have reported the unmistakable wail of an infant coming from empty hallways, or worse, from inside locked rooms. One janitor quit after following the sound for 20 minutes, convinced he would find a lost child, only to find himself standing alone in the Rose Room with the temperature suddenly dropping 10 degrees. No baby, no explanation. Theories abound. Some link the cries to the numerous tragedies that befell presidential families within these walls. Infant mortality was tragically common in the 19th century, and the White House was no exception. Others believe it's not one ghost, but an echo, a psychic residue left behind by grief too deep to dissolve. There's never a visual manifestation, just the crying, and it moves. The sound bounces through vents, crawls down staircases, bleeds through solid walls. And the worst part? It always seems just out of reach. Like the building is drawing you in, daring you to find what isn't there. Eventually, the cries stop. Not with a fade, but with a snap. Like a cut to the silence on a broken record. And in the hush that follows, most people leave the room without looking back. Because they know if they do, they might see who's holding the child, or who isn't. The little girl ghost. She doesn't cry, she laughs. Unlike the phantom infant, the little girl ghost of the White House is playful, and that's what makes her terrifying. Multiple staff members and even a few presidential guests have described seeing a fleeting figure, a young girl in 19th century clothing, maybe 7 or 8 years old, skipping down the hallway or peeking around corners. She's never spoken. She doesn't need to. She appears in flashes. Always when no children are known to be in the building. In photos, she's sometimes been spotted standing just outside the frame, her features blurred as if caught mid-giggle. One aide recounted sitting alone in a hallway reading reports when he heard the unmistakable sound of a jump rope hitting the floorboards behind him. He turned. Nothing. Then he saw it, a faint scuff mark, as if tiny feet had just been there, dancing. Unlike other White House spirits, the girl's presence isn't mournful or angry. It's mischievous. Objects move slightly out of place, dolls appearing where none were before. soft footsteps trailing behind, light and unhurried. It's like the ghost of a child who never grew up, maybe never got the chance. But her most disturbing appearances are always the same. A flash of movement in the corner of your eye, a burst of laughter in an empty corridor, and then silence. Who was she? No records identify her clearly. Some speculate she was the child of a servant or a visiting diplomat. Others think she might be the ghost of one of the Lincoln boys, Willie or Tad, in a younger form. But most agree on one thing. When she appears, the air changes. Not colder, but lighter. Off balance, like the universe has briefly turned upside down to accommodate her skipping feet. And where children laugh, someone often watches over them, except in this case, the hand that reaches for yours is invisible. The unseen hand. Sometimes the ghosts don't show up with drama. Sometimes they just touch you. The sensation of the unseen hand is one of the most commonly reported and most unsettling supernatural experiences in the White House. It's not loud. It doesn't knock or speak. It reaches. Staff have reported feeling a cold brush across their backs, a light tap on the shoulder, or the chilling feeling of fingers sliding across their skin. One intern claimed she felt a hand grip hers during a tour in the Red Room. She turned, expecting someone behind her. There was no one. But the sensation didn't vanish. It slowly faded, as if whatever had held her was reluctantly letting go. Presidents have felt it too. Harry Truman wrote in his letters about mysterious touches while working late. One night he claimed a hand pressed gently against his back, like a parent encouraging a child to move forward. He didn't look. He didn't want to. The touch is never violent. It's intimate, personal, too personal. There's something deeply human about being touched by something you can't see. It bypasses skepticism and dives straight into the primal. You are not alone. And in a place like the White House, layered with grief, power, and legacy, maybe the unseen hand is just the building itself, reaching out, reminding you that everything here is watched, remembered. And if you're very lucky or very cursed, that hand might even play a song for you. A song coming from a piano, with no one at the keys. The piano playing itself. The East Room is all grandeur and performance. Chandeliers, polished floors. The place where presidents have danced, mourned, and made history. And late at night, when it should be still, you might hear music. Soft, melancholic. A few notes at a time. The piano plays itself. It doesn't happen during the day. Only in the dead quiet, when the last guests have gone and the building breathes its slowest. That's when someone, or something, sits at the keys. Witnesses have described the music as faint, like it's being played from the far end of a long tunnel. Others claim the notes are sharp and clear, echoing through the room as if announcing the presence of a long-gone performer. President Truman once admitted to hearing it. He thought someone was sneaking into the East Room after hours, but every time he sent someone to check, they found nothing. No one. Just an empty room and keys gently rocking back to stillness. Theories vary. Some say it's the ghost of a musically inclined First Lady returning for one last recital. Others suspect Lincoln himself, known for his deep melancholy, wandering back through the halls he once filled with grief, and pressing the keys to ease his unrest. Still others believe it's a former White House staffer, someone whose job involved evening entertainment, still showing up for their set centuries later. No matter who plays it, the song always stops the same way, mid-note, as if interrupted, or perhaps distracted by something we can't see. And sometimes, after the final note fades, visitors say they feel a draft move past them, a breeze, or a presence leaving the room. But the music isn't over yet, because upstairs, in the very bed where Lincoln himself once slept, something is beginning to rise. The presidential bed levitation. You don't sleep easy in the Lincoln bedroom. Ask Winston Churchill. The story goes that he lit a cigar after a hot bath, towel-clad and half-wrapped in post-war fatigue, only to find Abraham Lincoln's ghost standing by the fireplace, watching him. Churchill never stayed in that room again. But that's not the only tale. Guests and staff have reported that the bed itself, the heavy carved presidential bed, has moved. Not just creaked, not just shifted, levitate, covers pulled back by invisible hands, pillows rearranged while guests slept. One visitor swore the mattress rose 2 inches while they lay on it, like something beneath was lifting them, or someone above was pulling. There are no riggings, no prank devices, just the sense of being in a room where gravity works. Differently, people describe a pressure in the air, like the bed is floating in thick syrup. Some have woken to find themselves at the very edge of the mattress, despite falling asleep at the center. Others report the feeling of being gently but firmly nudged to one side, as if making room for someone else. It's not violence, it's presence. And in the White House, presence is power. Theories tie the levitations to moments of political turmoil. When the nation is in distress, the bed becomes a symbol, an altar where the past stirs and the dead presidents turn in their spectral sleep. But sometimes the haunting isn't in the furniture. It's in the walls, in the very air of a room named for royalty, and in the Queen's bedroom. Something is watching. The presence in the Queen's bedroom. It doesn't show itself. It doesn't speak. But it knows you're there. The Queen's bedroom, part of the Lincoln suite, isn't haunted in the theatrical sense. There are no cold drafts, no rattling chains, no shrieks. But people who've stayed there, or even entered briefly, report one consistent bone-deep sensation. They're not alone. Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands famously stayed in this room during a visit. She woke in the night to a knock at the door. She opened it. Abraham Lincoln stood before her, solemn and spectral. She fainted. The story spread like wildfire, but it was more than a ghost story. It cemented the room's reputation. Since then, other guests have felt it, a heavy silence, a weight in the room that doesn't lift, mirrors that reflect shadows that shouldn't be there, bedsheets that seem tucked too tightly, as if pressed down by invisible hands. There are no reports of physical harm, but almost everyone who stays there leaves early. Whatever haunts the Queen's bedroom doesn't want to be seen, but it wants to see. Guests describe waking up in the night with a distinct, terrifying certainty that eyes are watching them from the corners, that someone is standing just inside the closet door, waiting. It's not an active ghost, it's a sentinel. And if that isn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear the sound of footsteps, with no feet, because next come the ghosts who walk on 4 legs and bark. The Roosevelt dogs. They say all dogs go to heaven, but some prefer Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House has hosted dozens of presidential pets, from ponies to parrots. But few left as lasting an impression as Franklin D. Roosevelt's beloved Scottish Terrier, Fala. Loyal, intelligent, and famously photogenic. Fala was more than a pet. He was a wartime companion, a symbol of morale, and one of the few beings FDR seemed to fully trust. And apparently, he's not done patrolling the premises. Multiple staffers over the years have reported hearing the distinct click-click of small claws on polished floors. Some have felt the soft brush of fur against their ankles while walking through certain rooms. There are even accounts of muffled barking echoing down empty corridors. No visible dog, just the sound, the presence. Fala is believed to be the primary canine culprit, especially around the areas where he used to accompany FDR, near the family quarters and the South Lawn. But some stories speak of other dogs too. A quiet whine near the Resolute desk. A low growl heard by a night watchman in the Rose Garden. Tail wag seen from the corner of the eye, vanishing the moment you turn to look. It's not scary, it's strange, comforting even. Like the ghosts of these animals are still on duty, still guarding the building, still waiting for the man they loved to walk out of a room, reach down and say, "Good boy." But not all sounds from the past are friendly, because when the notes start drifting in from the East Room again, notes that no living pianist is playing, you'll know the next ghost has arrived. The Truman piano. It wasn't just the press or Congress that kept Harry Truman up at night. In 1946, Truman wrote a series of letters describing his eerie experiences alone in the White House. The footsteps, the creaks, the disembodied sounds. But one moment stood out, the piano. He reported hearing piano music late at night. Not a full performance, just fragments, scales, slow melodies, sometimes sharp, discordant keys, as if someone was practicing. Poorly. He'd checked the East Room, empty. No footprints on the freshly waxed floor. No one on duty, just the piano, still vibrating. The music came irregularly. Sometimes just one night a month. Sometimes multiple nights in a row. The notes always faint. Always distant. Like someone rehearsing backstage of a ghost story. Truman believed in ghosts. At least, he believed something was there. "I sit here in this old house," he wrote, "and all the creaking and groaning and popping are driving me nuts." He even joked that if the ghost didn't quit playing that infernal piano, he'd hire a new pianist. Some think it's the same spectral performer from the self-playing piano legend. Others say it's a different spirit entirely, a child perhaps, or a first lady retracing melodies long forgotten. But Truman's connection to it makes this haunting feel uniquely personal, like the music was playing for him. Today, the East Room still hosts formal events, but at night, when the guests are gone and the chandeliers go dim, sometimes staff still hear music where there should be silence. And it always comes from the same place. But the next ghost doesn't bring music. It brings the weight of war, the ghost of a Union soldier. He never made it home. But somehow he made it here. The White House wasn't just a residence during the Civil War. It was a command post, a hospital, and a haven for strategy and sorrow. Soldiers marched outside its gates. Some were invited in. Some never left. The ghost of a Union soldier is said to appear on the periphery of White House grounds, especially during high-stress political periods. He's rarely seen indoors. More often, it's a figure glimpsed through a window. A man in blue wool, rifle slung, standing guard in the shadows just beyond the rose bushes. Some say he paces, others say he simply waits. Security teams have reportedly seen motion sensors triggered on the lawn, only to find nothing but boot-shaped impressions in the wet grass. One Marine stationed at the North Portico described hearing a voice whisper, "Hold the line," as he stood watch alone. The soldier never interacts, never advances. He's a relic on repeat, frozen in duty. But it's not just a ghost story. It's a time capsule. A reminder that the White House didn't just witness war, it absorbed it. And in some corner of the South Lawn, that war is still happening. And from the battlefield to the kitchen, because the next presence isn't a fighter. It's a cook, still chopping, still stirring, still haunting. The ghostly cook. Some ghosts mourn, others mutter. This one, she cooks. Buried beneath the executive residence, the White House kitchens are a world of their own. Clattering pans, hissing stovetops, recipes guarded like classified intel. But long after the chefs have gone home and the ovens have cooled, there's one spirit still stirring the pot. She's not seen, but she's heard and smelled. Late-night staff report the distinct aroma of onions sizzling in butter, or the sweet scent of baking bread wafting up through the vents when absolutely nothing is cooking. Others describe the sound of pots gently tapping together, or utensils clinking as if being set out for a grand meal. On more than one occasion, chefs arriving in the morning have found ingredients prepped, ovens warm, and prep stations oddly immaculate, though the night shift had ended hours earlier. The ghostly cook is believed to be a former White House chef or servant, bound by ritual. Some say she appears whenever a state dinner is being planned, ensuring no detail is missed. Others think she's just keeping the kitchen alive, refusing to let modern machines replace tradition. There's a particular spot near the pantry that always feels warm, no matter the season. Staff call it her corner. That's where the smells are strongest. That's where the sounds begin. And that's where even the boldest kitchen workers tread lightly. She doesn't scare. She works. A ghost on duty, forever seasoning history with a pinch of the past. And when the scent of pipe smoke drifts into her kitchen, That's when you know another presence has entered the room. The phantom smell of pipe smoke. No fire, no pipe, no man, just the smoke. It curls out of nowhere, sweet, acrid, unmistakable. The scent of an old-fashioned pipe drifting through the White House air. You're not supposed to smell tobacco in the most secure building in the nation. And yet, there it is. The phenomenon tends to manifest in rooms with deep presidential lineage, private studies, reading nooks, the library. Some say the smell signals the presence of one of the founding fathers. Others claim it's an echo of 20th-century presidents who found solace in quiet clouds of smoke while history weighed down on them. The pipe smoke always arrives unannounced. No one ever sees it. They just smell it, then feel it. A sudden gravity in the room, like being watched by someone who never speaks, just judges silently through the haze. Security guards have chased the scent down corridors, only to have it vanish mid-step. Cleaning crews have scrubbed walls to remove the smell that was never there, and one junior staffer swore she felt a puff of warm air against her face, laced with tobacco, as she entered the library alone. The ghosts who left this trace behind didn't slam doors. They sat in silence, thinking, planning, smoking. Their politics may be gone, but their rituals remain. And if the smoke makes your eyes water, you might want to blink twice. Because in that flickering light, you just might catch a glimpse of the man who once drafted an entire country's foundation and who still refuses to sit still, the ghost of James Madison. He was small in stature, quiet in tone. But in death, James Madison looms larger than life. The fourth president and the so-called father of the Constitution, Madison left his imprint on American democracy, and according to whispers, on the White House itself. Though not as frequently reported as Lincoln or Jackson, Madison's ghost is said to be one of the most focused, one of the most restless. He appears, when he appears at all, in flashes of blue coat and powdered hair, but it's the feeling that gives him away. A thick, cerebral pressure in the air, like someone's reading over your shoulder. Staff working late in the library have reported the sensation of being observed, watched not by a ghost of sorrow, but of scrutiny. Some say Madison paces, not randomly, but deliberately, like a man composing arguments in his mind. He's been seen reaching for books that aren't there. Others claim to have heard him muttering under his breath, the words lost to time, the tone sharp and urgent. It's as though he's still editing the Constitution, still fine-tuning the language of liberty, even as the world changes wildly around him. No tricks, no scares, just the weight of thought that never turned off. A man too busy to stay dead. And if you think Madison is intense, wait until you meet the next ghost. A general, a president, a man carved in stone and legend, who may still be pacing the war room in spectral silence. The ghost of Ulysses S. Grant. He was the bulldog of the battlefield, the quiet strategist who crushed rebellion with relentless resolve. But Ulysses S. Grant was more than a general. He was a weary soul forged in the fire of civil war, and according to whispered reports, his ghost might still march through the White House's silent hours. Unlike the flamboyant apparitions of Lincoln or Jackson, Grant's presence is subdued, subtle, still commanding. Security staff working graveyard shifts have described hearing slow, heavy footsteps, deliberate even, like boots accustomed to muddy trenches. Once, a military aide swore he saw a tall figure in Union blue standing in the shadows near the diplomatic reception room. The figure didn't speak, just watched, then vanished. The air changes when Grant arrives. Not colder, but heavier, like the weight of command has returned. Visitors have described the sudden scent of leather and gunpowder, a ghost of a battlefield lingering in a marble palace. Grant's ghost has been linked to moments of political pressure, appearing during times of crisis or civil unrest. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's duty, a general still standing guard over the nation he once saved, now haunting the building where its fate is decided. But Grant doesn't stick around. He fades as quietly as he arrives, his spectral inspection complete. And when he's gone, The silence thickens. Until the next phantom arrives, one who doesn't show his face, but still makes his mark. A mystery in green velvet. The apparition in the green room. It's one of the most elegant rooms in the White House. Green silk walls, classical paintings, and antique furniture that whispers history with every creak. But the green room is more than just a museum piece. It's a portal. And what moves through it has no name. This apparition has been spotted sporadically over the decades. Never clearly, never predictably, but always in the same way. A blur in the corner. A flicker in the mirror. A presence that doesn't walk, but glides. Silken. Soundless. Impossible. Unlike the known ghosts of presidents and first ladies, this entity has no identity. Some say it's a former servant. Others believe it's a visitor who died during a reception. A few speculate it's something older, perhaps pre-White House, pre-country. A soul buried beneath the layers of construction and reconstruction. Those who felt it describe a wave of nausea, a tugging at the chest, a need to leave the room now with no clear reason why. Others report the sound of rustling fabric, as if a gown or cloak were brushing past invisible walls. The green room doesn't feel haunted in the traditional sense. It feels observed, like you're not supposed to be there, like you've stepped into a memory that hasn't finished playing. And when that memory releases you, you'll want to hurry to the next room, where the help never left. The spectral servants, they punch no clocks, they take no breaks. They are the White House's most loyal employees, and they're all long dead. The legend of the spectral servants stretches back generations. Presidents, first families, and staff have all quietly spoken of unseen butlers opening doors before they're touched, of firewood being restacked in unlit hearths, of linen closets found perfectly organized after being left in disarray. These are not malicious spirits. They are not warning or wailing. They are working. One story tells of a maid who fainted after entering a guest room and finding it already turned down, hours before she had started her shift. Another report mentions a whisper of movement in the residence hallway, where staff uniforms were once stored, followed by the scent of starch and lavender. The ghosts are often experienced as brief encounters, a flash of movement in servants' white, a polite cough from a room no one has entered, the distinct sense of someone just having stepped aside to let you pass. Some believe these spirits linger out of habit, others out of devotion. There's even speculation that certain spirits appear only during specific administrations, as if they were tied not to the building, but to the people they once served. One thing is certain, the White House isn't just haunted by power, it's haunted by service. By the quiet, invisible labor that kept the halls running long after the speeches ended. And sometimes, even the most invisible residents make their presence known, in the most awkward possible place, like, say, the bathroom. The haunted bathroom. Some hauntings are grand and glorious, others are awkwardly intimate. The White House bathrooms, those private tiled sanctuaries scattered throughout the executive mansion, are rarely discussed in ghost stories. Yet they've generated enough eerie experiences to earn their own whispered reputation. Because there's something unsettling about being in the most vulnerable of positions, only to feel like you're not alone. Staff and guests have reported toilets flushing by themselves, faucets turning on without a hand in sight, and mirrors fogging up with no steam source. Once, during a late-night event, a senator allegedly ran out of a bathroom pale and speechless, claiming he'd heard someone humming in the next stall, only to find the room completely empty. But the most consistent feature of this haunting, the feeling, that undeniable hair-raising certainty that someone is standing just outside the door, or worse, just behind the curtain. Cold drafts swirl out of sealed vents. Doors creak closed on their own. Lights flicker in deliberate rhythm, like an old Morse code warning, "Get out." It's not a single ghost. No one claims to see a particular figure. Instead, it's like the building itself is peeking in, watching, listening. Some speculate that the bathrooms are magnetized by their solitude, a place where people drop their guard, making them easier to reach. Others think that certain spirits just find amusement in disrupting moments of privacy. Either way, the haunted bathroom is not the place to linger. And just when the air finally settles and the mirror clears, you might feel something else entirely. A breeze, where there shouldn't be one. The mysterious cold breeze, no open windows, no ventilation, no reason. And yet, the breeze arrives. It's subtle at first, a whisper of air across the nape of your neck. You turn, expecting someone has entered the room. No one. The curtains ripple, papers shift, goosebumps rise, and suddenly you realize the temperature didn't drop. The air just moved. This phenomenon has been reported all over the White House, in hallways sealed tight against the seasons, in offices deep within the structure, in bedrooms where no airflow should exist. It always comes quickly, like an unseen figure brushing past. Sometimes it's warm, more often it's icy. And it's not just physical, it's psychological. The breeze is accompanied by a shift in mood. Calm moments turn uneasy. Conversations pause. People forget what they were saying. One staffer described it as a mental static, a brief moment where reality feels slightly off. What causes it? Some say it's the ghosts themselves, traveling, moving from room to room, slipping through walls and dragging the atmosphere with them. Others claim the White House is an emotional pressure cooker, and the breeze is simply a release valve, spirits exhaling. But if the cold air moves past you and lingers, if it circles, hovers, twists around your legs like a cat, that's when you start to worry. Because the next breeze may not come from a ghost of an adult. It may belong to someone much younger. The ghost of Willie Lincoln. He was just 11 when he died, and he never really left. William Wallace Lincoln, Willie, was the beloved son of Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln, a bright, sensitive child who adored poetry and quiet walks with his father. But in February 1862, amid the chaos of the Civil War, he fell ill with typhoid fever and died in the White House. His death devastated both parents. Mary spiraled into spiritualism. Abraham wore his grief like armor, and Willie, it seems, remained. His ghost is subtler than his father's. While Abraham Lincoln's spirit strides through the halls like a monument of melancholy, Willie appears only in glimpses. A boy's laughter, where there should be none. A shadow darting past the nursery door. A toy displaced. A small handprint left in the dust of a locked room. Staff have spoken in hushed tones about hearing soft footsteps at night, too light to be adult, too heavy to be rodent. One cleaning crew swore they saw a figure in period clothing on the stairwell, just standing still. When they approached, it vanished. There's no menace in Willie's ghost. Only sadness, the grief of a life interrupted, the echo of a child in a house where so many children grew up. But he never got to. Mary Todd believed in his presence completely. She held seances, begged for signs, clung to whispers and knocks like lifelines. And whether through her longing or through Willie's own will, his spirit has become one of the White House's most fragile ghosts. He doesn't speak. He doesn't shout. He just is. And when you see a marble doorknob slowly turning, even though no one is touching it, you might want to look behind you. Because the next ghost doesn't mourn. He guards. The ghostly guard. Some ghosts watch. This one patrols. The ghostly guard is less a spirit and more a sentinel, an unblinking fixture in the haunted hierarchy of the White House. Descriptions vary, but one element remains consistent. He's always on duty. Dressed in a military-style uniform, sometimes described as Union blue, sometimes a Secret Service-style suit, he appears during the deep hours of the night, walking fixed routes with precision. Head high, gaze sharp, rifle sometimes slung over a shoulder or hand resting near his waist as if ready to draw. He does not speak. Witnesses have spotted him along the corridors near the East Room and even outside the private family quarters. Often, it's a fleeting glimpse, the flash of a hat, the glint of brass buttons, the heel click of boots against ancient wood, then nothing. Gone. As if he turned a corner that doesn't exist, White House staff have tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe it's a misidentified uniform from a historical display. But then the temperature drops, radios cut out. A breeze sweeps through a sealed hallway, and the figure reappears. One Marine on duty near the entrance once reported saluting a man he assumed was a high-ranking official walking past. The man didn't respond. He simply turned and faded through a closed door. Who is he? No one knows. Some believe he's a former Secret Service agent who died in service. Others think he's a Civil War soldier guarding the president forever. Or maybe he's something older, a spiritual construct born from centuries of paranoia and responsibility, the manifestation of vigilance in a building that can never sleep. But even he doesn't stay put. Because the moment you glance away, the portraits start to shift. The moving portraits, they shouldn't move, but they do. The portraits lining the halls of the White House are more than art. They're ghosts in oil and canvas. Washington, Jefferson, Kennedy, Roosevelt. All those eyes, watching. And every so often they change. It's never dramatic, never Hollywood. You won't catch Lincoln winking at you or Madison frowning. But staff and visitors alike have described a subtle, eerie phenomenon. You walk past a painting. You glance back. The head is tilted. The expression, just slightly different. As if the subject heard something you didn't. And then there's the shifting. Frames crooked, eyes misaligned. Portraits that were straight the night before suddenly angled by morning. Once, a staff member swore she watched a frame nudge itself on the wall. A slow, deliberate motion like someone was repositioning it for better viewing. Cameras confirm no seismic activity, no tampering. Worst of all are the eyes. You feel them following you. It's not imagination. Multiple aides have described walking down a hallway and sensing pressure, like heat, from a particular painting, as if someone inside it was leaning closer. Presidents themselves have joked about it, with more than one suggesting certain portraits seemed particularly judgmental during difficult decisions. Some believe the paintings are mere conductors, vessels for the spirits of the men and women they portray. Others argue they've absorbed the emotional residue of centuries. And maybe, just maybe, those figures have unfinished business and a very clear view of who walks their halls today. And while the portraits might just shift in silence, the next ghost lets you know it's arrived because it rings the bell. The phantom doorbell, ding-dong, and no one's there. The phantom doorbell has become one of the most enduring minor mysteries of the White House. The front door, locked, guarded, and watched, rings on its own. Sometimes once, sometimes in a flurry. Staff answer, nothing. No visitor, no courier. Just the echo of a sound that had no source. This isn't a faulty wire situation. Electricians have checked. Systems have been replaced. The phenomenon persists. Even when disconnected, the bell has been known to sound. It's as if someone, or something, is announcing its arrival the old-fashioned way. And it doesn't just happen at the front. Intercoms have crackled to life with static and a soft chime. Inner doors have buzzed as if someone were requesting entry, only to reveal an empty hallway. Once, during a major international summit, the doorbell rang 7 times in succession. Each time the Secret Service checked the entrance. No one. Some say it's a ghost reenacting a final visit, an ambassador or friend who once walked those steps and still hopes to be let in. Others believe it's a warning, that the bell rings before something big, something political, something personal, as if the house is trying to say someone's coming. No one has ever opened the door to see a ghost, but someday someone might. And when they do, they'll be standing face to face with whatever lingers in the seat of power itself, the Oval Office. The haunting of the Oval Office. It's the most powerful room in the world. And it doesn't sleep. The Oval Office isn't the most frequently haunted space in the White House, but when something does stir within its perfect symmetry, it's never subtle. Unlike the East Room or the Lincoln bedroom, the Oval Office carries a different kind of weight. It's not grief or rage, it's pressure. And when the ghosts show up, the pressure tightens like a rope pulled taut, Multiple presidents have reported strange feelings while working late. Sudden drafts, inexplicable dread, the sense of being watched from just outside the frame of the flags. One commander-in-chief refused to spend late hours alone in the room after repeatedly hearing faint tapping from the Resolute desk. A rhythmic knock, 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 like someone trying to get out. Aides have mentioned stepping into the office early in the morning and feeling as though someone had just left. Papers shifted slightly, the faint scent of cologne or pipe smoke in the air, a chair slightly off-kilter. No alarms triggered, no cameras catching anything unusual. Just an eerie sense that decisions had been made. Without them, there are no confirmed apparitions here, no figures drifting between the drapes. But the feeling is undeniable. The air feels older, more aware. Some believe the room itself holds on to the energy of those who sat behind that desk. Roosevelt, Kennedy, Nixon. Their choices, their fears, their ghosts. Trapped in the wood and leather and paint. And when that energy spikes, strange things start to happen elsewhere. Starting with things going missing and coming back wrong. The disappearing objects, they vanish in plain sight. 1 minute, your pen is on the desk. The next, it's gone. You check your pockets, nothing. You check the floor, empty. You look again. And there it is, sitting on the bookshelf across the room, or in another wing entirely. Disappearing objects are one of the most quietly maddening phenomena in the White House. It happens to everyone. Aides, guards, visiting dignitaries. Phones vanish and return with the battery mysteriously drained. Glasses slip off tables and show up in drawers. Keys have been known to disappear during staff meetings, only to be found hours later placed neatly in the exact center of the Roosevelt room floor. No explanation, no pattern, just the eerie sense of mischief. Is it the ghost of a playful servant? A childlike spirit bored with eternity? Or is it the building itself, conducting some kind of spiritual stress test? One theory suggests the White House is layered with thin psychic membranes, veils of energy where items can slip through and return changed. A stranger theory posits that the building, like a trickster god, simply doesn't like clutter. But regardless of the explanation, the phenomenon is real and recurring. And the next time your phone goes missing during a tense meeting, don't blame your intern, blame the spirits, and hope it's just a ghost and not something older, because the next legend speaks of a haunting far more ancient. Something indigenous, something sacred, something watching. The ghost of a Native American, before the marble, before the columns. Before Washington, D.C. was a capital, it was land, tribal land. The White House was built on territory once occupied by Native American tribes, and while much of that history has been paved over with bureaucracy and brick, some say the land itself remembers, and it still watches. Sightings are rare, but unforgettable. Multiple accounts over the years speak of a Native American elder, sometimes a chief, sometimes a shaman, appearing briefly in or near the gardens, or seen standing solemnly near the edges of the south lawn. He says nothing. He does nothing. He just stands, still, watching. Witnesses describe the air going quiet around him. Birds stop chirping. The wind dies. It's not fear they feel, but reverence. As if something sacred has passed through a place not meant to hold it. Some say he appears during times of national shame or crisis. Others believe his presence is a quiet protest, a spiritual reminder that the ground beneath the politics belongs to another people. Gardening staff have spoken in hushed tones about ceremonial drums heard at dawn, low, steady beats echoing up through the soil, vanishing before they reach the surface. One landscaper swore he found a circle of perfectly arranged pebbles, gone by the next morning. No animal could have done it. No person had access. The ghost never enters the building. He remains outside, unwelcome perhaps, or perhaps guarding it from the inside. Because the land remembers. Even if the walls forget, the sound of chains, clink, drag, rattle. It doesn't belong in a place of power. And yet the White House has heard it. The sound of chains, slow, metallic, and unmistakably human-made, has been reported in the basement corridors, behind thick walls, and sometimes, horrifyingly, in rooms that were once used for storage or servant quarters. It's never consistent. It doesn't follow a schedule. But when it arrives, it carries the weight of history's ugliest truths. Witnesses describe it as a soft clinking that escalates into a dragging noise, like shackles being pulled across stone, often accompanied by a sudden chill or the sense of being observed by something ancient and unspoken. Some hear it in short bursts, metal scraping followed by silence. Others hear it rhythmically, methodically, as though someone or something is pacing. Theories abound, but the most chilling is also the most grounded. The sound may be an echo from the White House's earliest construction, when enslaved laborers toiled to build the nation's seat of power. Their suffering, ignored for generations, may have left behind a residual imprint, one that clangs through time when the silence grows too deep. This isn't a ghost that appears in mirrors or speaks in riddles. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be heard. Because chains don't just bind, they remember. And sometimes they refuse to be forgotten. And when those sounds finally fade, the breeze in the rose garden carries a different kind of whisper. A gentler one. A gardener's touch. The unseen gardener. Some ghosts guard legacy, others prune it. The unseen gardener of the White House isn't violent or mournful. He or she simply tends. Reports of phantom hands at work in the Rose Garden or Jacqueline Kennedy Garden have been shared in quiet tones by groundskeepers and horticultural staff for decades. Flowers found trimmed when no one's admitted to doing it. Dirt turned and patted down. Water cans moved across long stretches of lawn. Weeds that disappear overnight. There's no figure, no shadow. But the signs are clear. Someone still loves the garden. Some attribute it to the ghost of Dolly Madison, fiercely protective of her roses. Others think it's a former gardener who spent a lifetime shaping the presidential earth and refused to retire in death. Either way, the work continues. One story involves a visiting horticulturist who walked through the garden at dawn, only to stop dead in his tracks. Every plant was subtly rotated, just slightly, to better face the sun, as if unseen hands had adjusted them one by one. And then there's the scent. A mix of soil, honeysuckle, and something faintly citrus. It trails through the hedges like perfume, vanishing the moment you try to trace it. The gardener doesn't speak, doesn't manifest, but they're there, quietly preserving the bloom beneath the politics. And sometimes the laughter of a child drifts through the air behind them. The ghost of a child playing. You hear it first. A giggle, a laugh. The scurry of small feet over ancient wood. No alarms go off, no staff are missing, and yet, there it is again, laughter. Too light to be adult, too joyful to be anything but a child. But there are no children scheduled to be here. The ghost of a child. Playing has been heard in every part of the White House, though most often in corridors near the family quarters or old guest rooms. Staff describe the unmistakable sound of running. Tiny footfalls darting between rooms. Once, a White House aide left a stack of briefing folders on a table, only to return moments later to find them spread out in a perfect arc, like a child laying out toys. Sometimes it's accompanied by the sound of a bouncing ball. Other times it's just the voice. A quick wee echoing through a stairwell. No figure ever appears, just movement. Sound, mischief. Who is the child? It could be the same spirit as Willie Lincoln, or one of the other children who lived and died in or near the White House throughout its long history. Maybe even a servant's child, lost to time but never forgotten by the building itself. Whatever the case, this ghost doesn't frighten. It plays. It reminds us that even in the most solemn of places, innocence lingers. But if you listen too closely, you might start hearing hoofbeats and wheels on gravel that's no longer there. The phantom horse and carriage, long after the last hoofprint was scrubbed from Pennsylvania Avenue, and long after engines replaced reins, The sound of horses pulling a carriage still echoes faintly through the grounds of the White House, a relic of an era past, galloping into the present, unseen but unmistakable. Witnesses describe it as a distant clatter, hooves against cobblestone, metal wheels grinding slowly, rhythmically over gravel that no longer exists. Some say it begins faintly, almost like a trick of memory, and then crescendos until you're certain it's just outside. A window rattles. A breeze carries the scent of horse sweat and hay. And then, silence. No tracks are ever found. No carriage seen. The Secret Service has investigated on multiple occasions after motion detectors and security cameras picked up the vibrations, but nothing ever shows up. Not even a shadow. Just the sound, arriving from nowhere, fading into nothing. Theories suggest the ghostly procession is a residual haunting, an echo of some long-forgotten state visit or funeral procession looping eternally around the building. Others think it's tied to a specific moment in time, perhaps Lincoln's funeral train, which made its way through a grieving capital, leaving behind a trail of sorrow so deep it seeped into the ground. But whatever the origin, it's not the sounds that disturb. It's the weight of history galloping just out of reach, a reminder that power, like a carriage, moves on wheels, and ghosts sometimes ride shotgun, and from one eternal profession to another, because in the press room, someone may still be filing a story. The ghostly press corps. Most ghosts linger for love or guilt or unfinished business. This one? Deadline pressure. There's a rumor that among the creaks and cold spots of the White House, the ghost of a journalist still haunts the press area. Some call him a relic from the Roosevelt era. Others insist he's a 20th century casualty of caffeine and national scandal. Whoever he was, he apparently couldn't give up the scoop. Security and cleaning crews have heard the soft tapping of typewriter keys echoing from an empty room. Printers whirring without power. The smell of ink and burnt coffee where no machines are running. One aide even claimed she found a printed sheet left on her chair, typed in an archaic font, detailing a scandal that hadn't yet broken publicly. Voices are sometimes heard too, muttering, rehearsing lines, asking invisible aides for confirmation on sources. It's as if the ghost is still reporting from the afterlife, desperate to get a lead, get a quote, get a headline. But no one ever sees him. Just a flicker of movement, a paper out of place, a cup half full of cold coffee where no one had been. It's not a malevolent presence, it's compulsive. A ghost still chasing the big story, still trying to beat the competition, still refreshing a feed that no longer exists. And if that spirit is still typing somewhere in the darkness, it may be because he knows what's really going on, because some believe the White House isn't haunted by ghosts at all, but by something deeper, something elemental, something drawn to the storm, the energy vortex. There are places on Earth where the air hums with intensity, where compasses falter, where time feels thicker. The White House may be one of them. Some spiritualists and fringe researchers claim the entire property is an energy vortex, a supernatural magnet fueled by centuries of human ambition, trauma, power, and emotion. Every meeting, every war declaration, every death, every celebration, it all compounds, layer upon layer of charged human experience, and the result? A swirling, invisible maelstrom that attracts spirits like iron to a magnet. Unlike hauntings confined to rooms or objects, this theory says the entire building is alive, breathing, remembering, pulling in not just the ghosts of presidents and first ladies, but of anyone who left a psychic imprint on the country. This vortex doesn't scream, it pulses. Staff have described feeling dizzy in rooms with no cause, time moving strangely, moments stretching or collapsing, dreams that feel more real than waking life. Paranormal investigators, unofficial ones naturally, believe this is due to intense electromagnetic fields caused by years of collective human focus on this one building. In a sense, the White House may not just be haunted, it may be awakened. And if that's true, then the ghosts inside are not merely visitors. They are residents, just like the living, just like the legends. And the storm of history, like all storms, never really passes. It just keeps spinning,